Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Student Room and our fourth and final application surgery. So our application surgeries are a live video series that we've been running here at TSR all throughout November, dedicated to helping you with your university application. So this is our fourth and final application surgery, as I mentioned, and you can watch all of our previous application surgeries back. There is a link in the first post of this thread if you want to go and have a watch of those. They included things like how to choose your university, whether university is right for you in the first place, and a little bit more about your university application and how you get started with that. And you can watch those back at any time, along with this one as well, if you are watching this back after it's live at 5. So my name is Grace and I'm a community manager here at the Student Room, and you may know me better as Strawberry Dreams on site. We may have bumped into each other on the forums. If we haven't met before and this is your first time on the Student Room, we hope you find this really useful and you stick around to get involved in some of the other things we have here on TSR. We've got loads of university application advice, support, help with revision and study tools, and also we're just a great place to come and have a chat with other students, so do come and join in. So if you're in year 12 or 13, we also have a really useful newsletter in which you can get all of the latest news and relevant updates for you. So again, check the first post of this thread and you can find out some more information on how to sign up for that. We can send you some really useful stuff to help you with your applications and general college life. So as I mentioned, this is the last one in our series, and we're going to have a look today at how to write and structure your personal statement to make it the best it can possibly be. So joining us today, we have Dan Rolfe, Deputy Head of Student Recruitment at the University of Surrey, to chat to us about acing your personal statement and getting that UCAS form all ready and sent off. Then what we'll do is go straight into a Q&A with Dan after he's given us a little bit of a presentation about the subject and what you need to do to ace your personal statement, and we'll get all of your questions answered. So Dan, thank you so much for joining us today. Would you mind giving us a little bit of an introduction about yourself and what you do at the University of Surrey?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Grace. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining or indeed watching back later. My name's Dan from the University of Surrey. Essentially, me and the team, we work across recruitment and admissions, and our role at the university is to support you like we're doing today in terms of getting you prepared for your application with your personal statement. We'll also see you throughout the year. So maybe in your school, not so much at the moment, but maybe in the future, we'll see you face to face. We'll see you at one of our virtual or physical open and applicant days. And then we'll be processing the application when it comes in, having a look through it, hopefully making you an offer, and then seeing you all the way through to enrolment in normally the following September. So we're really here to help you to apply to Surrey. Of course, the advice we give is covers all other universities as well, and the UK system more in general. But our role is really to help you through the process and make sure it's as simple and easy as possible.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dan. So what I'm going to do now is ask Dan to get started on sharing his screen and giving you a little bit of a presentation about writing a personal statement. Thank you.
Okay, brilliant. Excellent. Okay, great stuff. I think we're there, and hopefully you can see that okay. So let's make a start. Okay, so great. So thank you very much, everyone, again, for coming and joining us. This is going to be relatively short, so we're going to go through this in about 10 minutes because we want to leave time for your questions and to make sure that we can give you as much advice today and actually answer things you really want to hear about. But hopefully this will give you a really good introduction to how to structure the personal statement, the kind of things we're looking for, and some really good hints and tips about how to get started. But let's begin just quickly to kind of summarize what the personal statement is and indeed how we'll use it. So it's a really key element of the UCAS application form. I'm sure you already know that, or you've already become quite aware of that, but it's really the only free text part where you can actually write to us, the universities that you're applying to, and actually explain why you're motivated for the course, why you've chosen that subject area, what it is that indeed, that, you know, why you're making the application. So the personal statement part is really, really important. It's actually quite a short piece. So it's only 4,000 characters, 47 lines. So it's really quite a short piece. And I think there's two issues, and I'm sure we'll come on to this in the questions later, but a lot of the questions we get asked around how do I start? And then probably the second most common question is how do I then cut it down? Which I hope is reassuring in the sense that yes, it sometimes is hard thing to start writing, but actually once you start, most people do get into it and then actually find that they need to cut it down because they've written too much, and we'll talk a bit more about that later. So it's a relatively short piece. It's one statement that goes to all 5 choices. And again, this is really important because you're going to need to when you're writing to us, you're going to need to be explaining why the subject area. So why veterinary medicine, why economics, why English, for example, and not about why the University of Surrey or indeed any of the other universities you're applying to. So one statement for all 5 choices. It's a real opportunity to sell yourself, particularly if you're not going to be interviewed, which for a lot of courses you won't be. So this is, I guess, an opportunity to speak to the tutor, to explain more about yourself and to get that across, where you won't get to do that in an interview. Of course, if the program does interview, then perhaps the personal statement will be used to decide which candidates are brought to interview. So then it serves a very similar purpose, but it's that opportunity to get to the next stage in the process as opposed to getting an offer straight away. I would say for every university in the UK that you're applying to, it absolutely does contribute to their decision. It's often in different ways. So every university might have a different approach or use it in certainly a different way, but it will almost always contribute to their decision in some way, which is why it's important. It's why it's worth your time and worth getting it right. And it does take time to do well. So don't worry if this is taking you a little bit of time. Equally, don't rush it and don't expect to get it done really quickly. If you're in year 12 at the moment, maybe even younger than that, then great, you've got plenty of time before you start applying in September next year. If you're in year 13 and you're applying this year, you've still got plenty of time to meet the 15th of January UCAS deadline. It's great that you're thinking about it now and getting that preparation in and attending the session today. Do start preparing it as early as you can. That's always a top advice from us. And multiple drafts. Expect to do multiple versions, both for yourself, but perhaps also if you're having family, friends, teachers, and so on checking it. So don't expect to have one version. It's absolutely perfectly normal to have more than one. So a little bit more about the statement and again, how we're using it and the sort of things we're looking for. So we really do want you to demonstrate focus on the subject area that you're applying to, and also show us that you've done your research, you've got an appreciation for the courses that you're applying for, and also what it's like to study at university. And I'll come on to that more in a moment. It's a really good opportunity to show the appreciation for the course. It's particularly, this is useful if you haven't studied it before. So thinking if you're about your GCSEs, your A-levels, or the other subjects that you might have taken, thinking about your studies at school, essentially. What if you haven't studied veterinary medicine? What if you haven't studied civil engineering or acting, for example? How can you demonstrate to the person reading your statement that you've got an appreciation for what it's going to take to step up at university level and study that subject? And if you can get that across, then you're well on the way to writing a really good statement. We do, of course, want to see personality. This is a formal piece of writing. It's an application, so we do want it to be written well, but it's also a personal statement, and it is about showing personality and about who you are very much as an individual. We'll use it throughout the admissions process. So we will use it to bring you to interview, perhaps, if it's an interview course. We'll use it to make an offer, but we might also use it later on, for example, when we're confirming your place. So if we're looking at the grades that you achieved, particularly if you missed by a grade or didn't meet a subject requirement, we may look at it again then. So it comes back into play, and it's equally important later on in the application, which is another reason, I think, to spend time on it, for doing it well, and also why not to worry too much if you hear that some universities are using it more or less than others, because it will be used throughout the process. And as I said a moment ago, it might be the only opportunity you get to speak to the university, as it were, where you're not getting interviewed and if you're not attending a kind of an event or coming along before you enroll. So in terms of how to structure the statement, and this is, I guess, a top tip from me and from us about how we recommend starting it. And this is what we do in our workshops, and it works really well. So start with a really big list of ideas. So think about all of the things that you might want to tell us, your hobbies, your skills, your interests, achievements that you can think of over the last few years, things you've done in school, outside of school. I'd also include in here, motivations for applying, why this course, what's motivated you to submit the application for this program, all those ideas on a really big list. At this stage, the lists are absolutely fine. Loads of ideas, big A3 piece of paper, document, whatever it is, mood board, whatever type thing that is that you want to use to get all these ideas down. That's a really good place to start. The more, the better here. Now, after that, we will need you to be a bit more concise. So we'll start to think about how you're going to split the 4,000 characters, 47 lines. So 75% roughly, could be a bit more, could be a little bit less, subject specific, and then 25% extracurricular. So that would be a good guide in terms of how you would break down that big list and split that list into things that are course specific. So telling us about why you want to study accounting, why you want to study economics, the motivations there, and then 25% about extracurricular things that you've done. But the really good statements, the ones that are particularly impressive, actually merge these two together. So you don't spend, for example, 3/4 of the statement telling us why you want to do the course, and then 1/4 of the statement telling us all about your hobbies and things that you do outside the classroom and stuff you enjoy and things that make you tick and all that kind of stuff. Actually bring these together. And the way we recommend doing this is going back to your big list, perhaps picking out maybe 3, maybe 4 really specific examples, your strongest examples, the things that you think are really relevant, impressive, that you want to get across, and then bringing those 3 or 4 into the statement, thinking about 75% of the time, really bringing it back to the course, but making sure that you're bringing that personality through on the 25% there. So splitting it by thinking about how you present 3 or 4 different ideas, rather than thinking about it as I must talk lots about the course and then a little bit about myself afterwards. It's okay to do it like that, but we think doing it this way is stronger. And in terms of the things you might want to tell us about, and to kind of give you a bit of focus here. So why the subject area? That's a common one. And hopefully you'll be able to demonstrate in the statement why you're thinking about that particular subject. I say subject area because, as I said earlier, it's one statement for all 5 choices. So we want you to be thinking about why the subject, not why the particular course at Surrey or the particular course elsewhere. Future career could be a good one. This is particularly relevant, of course, if you want to be a vet or you want to be a nurse. We'd hope that you're applying for a nursing program, a veterinary medicine course. That makes a lot of sense. But it might be that there's a particular career in mind, and this degree is a stepping stone to that. And that's great. You can tell us about that. There's a clear link there between what you're thinking about doing in the future. Don't feel pressured to tell us this if it isn't the case. Lots of people go to university and they don't know what they want to do, and that's absolutely fine. Work experience is fantastic. We'd really like to know more about that. Definitely include that. It doesn't matter if it's a day, a weekend, a week, or if you've done it every summer for the last 2 or 3 years. It's about the things that have in that work experience that have motivated you to apply. It's about the quality moments in there that you can tell us about. If you've done taster days, summer schools, you're doing the EPQ, there's often lots of good examples in there that you can bring forward. Of course, from your big list, selecting relevant skills and interests that link to the program. An appreciation that it's a step up from school or college, that you are studying at a higher level, and the skills that you might need to do that. Further reading, again, where it's relevant and where you think it's useful to bring it in. And for some students, maybe a pivotal moment. And I've spoken to students recently, particularly on our acting program and on our theatre production, that have been watching a show, or they've been to New York and they've gone to Broadway, and they've had this moment where they think, yes, this is why I want to become an actor, or why I want to study theatre and set production. You might not have that, and that's okay. But if you've got it, then they're definitely worth telling us about. A really good tip that we use all the time when we're doing our workshops is ABC. So thinking about the action, the benefit that brings, and then linking it back to the course. And if you can do this, then the examples that you've picked from your original big list are probably the best ones, and probably the ones you want to include. This is where we're saying don't list things anymore. Start with a big list, but then we do need you to be more concise because it's such a short statement. So for example, the action, And this is from a real personal statement. So what would we identify as the action? Well, this student did some work experience. They did that at GlaxoSmithKline in their summer break. Fantastic. The benefit, how's that helped them? What's the takeaway from this? Well, they've, in their experience, got a deeper understanding of drug development process. That's the team that they were working with. So that's the process they understood. Fantastic. And the crucial bit, is it course relevant? Because it might be a really good example, but is it relevant for the course you're applying for? Well, they're applying for biochemistry, so that's a good sign. And it's really useful because they've seen in the courses they're applying for that that's actually covered in the first year modules. So they've already got some first-hand work experience. So this is a really strong point, and I would then include it in the statement. If it doesn't meet this test, it might be a good point, but not one you want to talk about too much. So things to avoid, lists after your big list, don't list things, pick 3 or 4 really good points and develop them and explain them. Don't repeat stuff that we already know about. If it's in the reference, if it's on the rest of the form, what A-levels, BTECs and so on that you're doing. Try to avoid cliches. I know it's hard, but people love to be passionate, successful at things, enthusiastic, and we see those a lot. So try and think about other things that you could include. Don't worry about fitting the mold and trying to be really out there and really kind of wowing an amazing statement. Don't worry about writing what everyone else says. It's a personal statement. It's personal to you. So try and keep it that way. And also, don't try and write it on your own. Now, I don't mean copy other people, of course. I don't mean work on it together with your friends and so on, but do show it to people and get them to sense check it. Does it sound like you? Have you overplayed some points? Have you maybe been a bit too generous in some areas? Probably not. You've probably undersold yourself actually, and maybe been a little bit too modest. So you might want to actually expand on a point and tell us more than you have. And showing it to family, friends, teachers, and so on can really help with that. Okay, some final thoughts for me before we break and actually look at questions. So firstly, just be really positive. So I know it sounds really obvious, but don't tell us about things that are negative. We all do things wrong sometimes. We all make mistakes. Things don't always go well, but you've got really limited characters. You've probably got, as I said earlier, 3 or 4 examples that you want to tell us about. So stick to the positive ones. They're the ones that we want you to include. Try and use creative language. So that's kind of like me saying, don't use the cliches, don't use passionate, enthusiastic, positive. Try and think of some other words that you could use, but keep it real. Like use your language, use how you would speak to us. It's a kind of formal piece, so think about that, but use your language, use something that's genuine to you. It's a personal statement and it's personal to you. So we do want to hear your voice, as it were, coming through. Remember what I said, it's worth the time, it's worth the effort because it's used throughout the process, and that's why it is relevant and it's worth spending your time on. I'd really recommend applying to university in general through your final year at school, because this is a great opportunity to get help from your peer group and your teachers and things like today with writing the personal statement. Even if you're thinking about a gap year or going off and working or doing something first, it's good to apply now, and you can apply often for deferred entry. So you can apply for 2 years' time, but you actually get that application done when you've got loads of support around you. Use open days, particularly at the moment. One of the great things is you can go to loads because so many are virtual. We're running ours at the moment, and you can go and see every single subject. And that might really help you when you're thinking, okay, what skills do I need for this course? What is the tutor looking for from me? Those kind of things will come out at these open days in the subject sessions. And so many of these are on demand. So even if you miss the key day or the live session, you can watch them back later. We've never had this much access to course information before in the UK, so definitely use it. And final thing is don't panic. This is a really well-trodden path. Loads of students go through it every year. Loads of students have all the kind of nervousness up front about writing the statement, getting it started, the challenges of cutting it down after. But it's a good system. UCAS system works really well, and you absolutely will get there. Just think about all the advice that we've given and other things you've read, and I'm really sure that you will do really well. Okay, that's all I wanted to go through here because I really do want to focus on the questions. So I will, I'll stop sharing with you now, and then we can take some questions from you.
Thank you so much, Dan. That was really useful and really informative. I hope you guys watching were able to kind of get some answers to some questions. But if not, we've now got the Q&A section where you can ask anything a little bit more specific. So I'm going to dive in if that's okay. So to start with, we might as well start at the very beginning, or personal statements and the Q&A. So Dan, is there any advice that you would give around how to start a personal statement? I know a lot of people find that really tricky.
Yeah, they really do. It's like we were saying before, quite hard to start and then really hard to cut down after. I think our advice is go for that big list. It's really important to get down everything. And I personally, I would do this thing. I would go and do the research. You may have done it already. Attend the open day, find out what the course is looking for. Think about the skills that you need to do well on that course. Think about the top things from your kind of portfolio that you'd like to tell us about, all those things that you found on the big list, and then start to structure those across the 3 or 4 points. I think I would avoid, and I think a lot of people find this quite useful, avoid writing the intro. It's really hard to write the introduction. So don't start there. Start on points 2, 3, 4, and 5, conclude, and then come back and do the introduction at the end. If you really struggle with that, because some people like to have an introduction, just write, "Hi, my name's Dan and I'm applying for business management." Do go back and edit that, but just write something to get you started. And then you can start flowing into your examples and then come back. The intro is much easier to write once you've finished and you know what you've said.
Perfect, thank you so much. So now we've got a couple of questions from 2020-Uni, who said, would things like work experience, extra reading, and the EPQ count as extracurricular or part of the other 75%, which is more course-based?
Yeah, I would say that they definitely can be in that 25% that's less course-based and is more focused on what you've done outside the classroom. So work experience being a great one, extra reading around the subject as well. You can certainly bring that in there. Work experience, I think the best thing there is pick a really good example, something from that experience where you thought, okay, I really now want to do this course. Sometimes people tell us, I've done 6 weeks in a law firm, and we don't know if you did 6 weeks and really didn't like it and it was terrible and you don't want to do law, but you're applying anyway, or you were making tea and coffee and you didn't really get much from it, and you weren't sure why you were there. Other people have done 1 day of shadowing, virtual shadowing, going along for a few days in half term, and have got loads of experience and it was like, this is absolutely for me and I really want to do it. So don't worry about telling us how much or how little you did. Just think about a really good example and bring it in. And like we were saying earlier, try and bring those two together. So for example, you might think that a really important skill for the course you're applying for is being able to do lots of reading around the subject. And you might be able to demonstrate that through the extra reading that you've done. Or it might be that it's teamwork and you need to demonstrate that you can work in groups and you did some work experience, you were part of a team, you achieved something, and you can bring them in there. So you're actually mixing the course specific stuff and the non-course specific stuff together. And that's probably going to give you a really strong point to bring through in the personal statement.
Perfect, thank you so much. Okay, now moving on to Christine9918. Christina said, if I'm applying for both biology and biomedical programs, how do I write about both of the programs in one personal statement? So essentially 2 different courses, 1 personal statement. What do you do?
Well, really good start, because you've actually picked related programs, which is great. It's really hard to write a statement for really extreme different subject areas. This comes back to 1 statement, I think, for 5 choices. So you're not going to be writing about the course, but you're going to be writing about the area, the broad area that you're applying for. I kind of like see it like as the discipline or the wider subject area. So just think about they're going to have similar things that you're going to look for from the course, not too dissimilar modules and kind of career outcomes after. So there'll be lots of things that cross over both, and just making sure that you keep that in mind when you're writing it and think about things that certainly apply to both. If you're thinking about like skills, motivations for the course, motivations for the application, the things that you need to do well at university, you'll find there's so much that crosses over anyway. And because you picked related areas, you'll be absolutely fine. And both tutors in the different departments will understand that they're not looking at it and thinking, this person hasn't applied has applied for other courses or is thinking about that. We don't know that for first thing to say, we don't actually see that. But even if we did, that wouldn't be a problem because they're so closely related.
Awesome, thank you. And what would you suggest if you were considering applying for 2 really different courses? Is that something that you would advise, or maybe have another think about? What do you think?
If you're thinking about 2 really different courses, our advice would definitely be to go back to the research stage and start to really think about which course you prefer out of the 2, if indeed it is one of the 2, and think about why you're going through this process and what you want to get out of it, because it might be that you haven't done enough research, you haven't really thought about it enough. There's some exceptions to that. So say you want to do a subject like economics with a language, it's perfectly understandable that you might want to combine it with a language. And even though they're really different, everyone, I think, in university and in the wider world after, will appreciate language skill, and our tutors and would completely understand if you were applying for a course with a language alongside. That's quite easy to do, even though the subjects are different. And some universities do allow quite broad combinations, but you'll probably struggle to find 5 that will have all of those different combinations, and you're then trying to write one statement to all 5. So bringing those subjects a little bit more closely related. Business and law, you'll find 5 of those. Economics and finance, you'll find 5 of those. But if they're too extreme, it will be hard to do. I think, as I say, the language option or anything that makes a lot of sense there would be fine. But otherwise, revisit that and have a little think about it, because it will be hard to do that well.
Perfect. I know there are a lot of people on TSR that keep talking about that, so I think that advice will be really useful. Thank you. So now having a little look at kind of like how to make your personal statement stand out a bit. So I'm going to butcher your username, I'm so sorry. Geopica14 and TinyGirl96 have asked similar questions around like, how do you know how to wow the person reading it? How do you make it unique or a little bit special?
Yeah, it's a great question, one we get asked a lot. I think firstly, like define wow. So don't worry too much about like blowing someone's socks off, or I hope you're sitting down when you read my statement. It doesn't have to be wow as in complete shock wow. I would say think wow could be really well written. It's going to a university, it's a formal piece of writing. Wow can be well structured, using just 3 or 4 good examples, not using lists, being specific. So actually a really good statement following some of the stuff we talked about today will definitely impress a tutor. If you've got something that coming back to that pivotal moment that we do see in some statements that does, I guess, have a wow factor to it, you can definitely bring that in. But for most departments and most courses, they're just looking for a really good statement that's followed some of the stuff we've talked about today. And in terms of making it unique, if you keep true to it being personal and personal to you, then it definitely will be unique. So, for example, you might be giving a similar reason as someone else, but when you're giving that example, it's going to be very unique to you. It's only going to be an example that really you have from your work experience or your life experience or from your studies. So the broad theme, like being motivated or being a good team player or doing lots of reading around the subject, they might be quite common themes that we'll see a lot of. But the examples that you give us to prove that, to show us how that's actually happened and what you've done and what you've achieved, those will be unique to you, and that's how you'll make the statement stand out.
Perfect, thank you so much. Okay, so we've got time for another couple of questions. So we have one from PQ who's asked, how many applicants do Surrey reject based on their personal statement? And I guess that can apply to all universities. How likely is it that if you write a really bad personal statement, you could get rejected just on that? Is that something that could happen?
It's a great question. In general terms, no, don't worry. You're not going to be rejected based solely on the personal statement. Firstly, to say, obviously, we want to be really, as universities, we'd love to offer everyone a place. So we're being really positive when we read your statement and we're reading it thinking, I hope we can make this person an offer. So we're not there to catch you out or to give you an unsuccessful outcome. But as I said earlier, the statement's used throughout the process. So we're using it at various different points, and every university is using it in slightly different ways, but it's going to contribute to our decision. So we're going to look at your whole application We're going to look at your school. Typically, it's your school tutor teacher reference. We're going to also look at your predicted grades, grades you've achieved in the past, perhaps work experience, voluntary work that you've done, all the things that you tell us on the application we're going to look for. And we'll make a decision based on all of that, a big kind of holistic view of everything you've done. And so it's really unlikely that a university wouldn't select you solely based on the statement. It's important because it makes up the part of the decision making that we do, but it's very unlikely that you'd be rejected solely on that part.
Perfect, thank you very much. Okay, so we've got time for one last question now, and this is from Lily3. And they've asked, how do you condense all of the stuff that you're writing initially into the word limit? Like, how much do you write on each topic? I know you mentioned 3 to 4 examples. Do you have any rough ideas on structure to do with that?
Yes, this is something that lots of people do struggle with. I think showing it to other people, so definitely showing your teacher, maybe your form tutor, showing friends and family, that can be really helpful because you can cut lines down, you can cut characters down just by being more concise and closer to the point, taking words out here and there. So if you're a little bit over, that's quite easy to do. That's just tidying up your work and going through it with someone and getting some advice. If you're really over, then I think you'll need to have a look, go through your statement and kind of pick out highlight to yourself the points that you've made. And maybe you found you've got 5 or 6 in there, and then really have another think about the course you're applying for, the sort of things that we would be looking for, and then try and cut that 2 or 3 out. And it's really hard because they're probably all really good and you want to tell us about all of them. But this is where you have to pick and choose between the ones that you want to give across. So selecting your best examples, the best things that you can tell us about, and best in the context of the course you're applying for and the things that course would need you to do would certainly be be the best way forward, I think, in terms of cutting it down. So there's some structure, there's some kind of essay structure type stuff you can do around not repeating words, being more concise, the sort of vocabulary that you use, sentence structure and so on. That's okay if you're a little bit over, but then there's a little bit of ruthless cutting down of some really good points that you want to tell us, but that's okay because your others are really strong. So just go for 3 or 4 of your best examples.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dan. We really appreciate it. That's all the time we've got for questions, unfortunately. But thank you so much for coming on. I think it was a really useful session. You have some amazing advice. I'm sure lots of people are going to be finding that really beneficial when they're writing their personal statements. So thank you so much.
No problem at all. Thanks for having us, and thank you everyone that came along.
No worries. So that's the end of the session today, and this is our last application surgery, as I mentioned. So this video that you're watching now, this will be available to watch back at any time, so don't worry about that. That will be available on this thread or on our YouTube channel, so do tune in if you want to watch anything back. If you're writing a personal statement and you just want to kind of touch up on something, that's absolutely fine. If you have any other questions around the UCAS application process, don't worry, we've got loads of people on site who are able to support you. So at the top of the screen, you'll find a start a new discussion button. If you click on that, write your question out, it will then be posted onto our forums, and we have some amazing people, as I mentioned, who come in and support you. So thank you all so much for joining us today. As I mentioned, I hope you found this useful, and have a lovely